You ready? Welcome, people, to the Southampton County Board of Supervisors October meeting. It's good to see so many people here. Let's now rise and face our flag.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have a volunteer from the audience that would lead us in a short invocation? Short prayer for tonight's meeting, anybody? Thank you, sir.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come before you tonight. Thanking you for all the many blessings that you bestow upon us. We thank you for this place we call Southampton County. It is our home. We just thank you for the opportunity to live here, to live in the garden spot of the world. Lord, we just thank you for these people who have come tonight. We thank you for our supervisors who give us their time. We thank you for the sheriff and his force who are here tonight. We just ask your blessing upon them in this time, that you will protect each and every one of them. And Lord, we just thank you that we can come as free citizens and participate in the government of this county. And we just ask that you would give us wisdom and guidance tonight as we conduct this business. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll entertain a motion. We're going to make a little switch in the program tonight.
Jim, I move that we make one change in the agenda by moving the item 12C in this meeting, which is covering the CARES Act funding. I make a motion that we do so.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion accepted. We will move that up. And this is 12C, the CARES Act funding update, 10/27/2020. And I'll turn that over to Mike and invite our sheriff here tonight to We want to get you guys back out on the road protecting us, okay?
That'll be fine. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, other board members, and to the citizens that came out to tonight's meeting. I'm Sheriff Josh A. White Sr., and I would like to address the board in reference to the CARES Act funding on tonight's agenda. After some discussions with the County Administrator, Mike Johnson, and Supervisors Gillette and Cornwell of the 452 Committee, I understand that they will be presenting a plan to the board tonight for suggestions on spending the remaining funds awarded to the county through the Federal CARES Act. Of particular interest to me and to my deputies is an allotment of funds to be spent as hazardous pay for the Central County workers. I am here tonight on behalf of the deputies seated in this room, standing in this room, for those that weren't able to speak in favor of all allocation of some funds, these funds as hazardous pay. These men and women have worked throughout the pandemic, answering calls for service, responding to motor vehicle accidents, enforcing traffic laws, making arrests, and keeping the peace in Southampton County. They did all this on a 24-hour per day, 7 days a week basis, while many other government agencies and businesses either closed completely, closed to the public contact, or allowed their employees to begin working from home. Health officials say don't travel unnecessarily. Our deputies are stopping reckless drivers on Route 58 from states all over the country. Health officials warn against being around large groups. Our deputies are responding to fights in progress with a group of onlookers estimated to be 8 persons. We are warned to avoid unnecessary contact with people, visiting friends and family. Our deputies will respond to citizens' homes all over the county to settle disputes and disturbances and to investigate burglaries, larcenies, and other crimes. Our deputies have been providing the same quality around-the-clock coverage in emergency response that they did before the pandemic began to affect the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is what the citizens of our county expect, and it is what they deserve. Our deputies have done this without complaint, knowingly putting themselves around people in situations where they are vulnerable to coming in contact with COVID-19 and taking the disease home to their families and becoming ill themselves. Private businesses and other government agencies began distributing hazardous pay this year after realizing sacrifices that some employees were making and potential danger they face in order to keep those business and government agencies running during the pandemic. This hazardous pay is an excellent way to show support to our men and women that have kept this county running by showing up and doing their jobs every day, even when others have had the option not to. This will be an incredible moral booster during what can only be described as a very difficult year. This hazardous pay will be coming from the federal grant fund that have already been awarded to Southampton County and will have to be returned by December 30th if it's not used. Our agency has received much love and support from the community. We serve all year long in the forms of donations of snacks, drinks, meals, cars, and even a simple thank you for what you do, from the occasional person we encounter in our daily travels. This vote for hazardous pay is a way for the board to say thank you to these deputies and others that will qualify, and I encourage you to do so. Please vote yes to this proposal for hazardous pay that will be presented later in tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much, sir. Okay, this amounts to the CARES Act funding, maximum $158,400. Will be used to provide hazard pay for 108 full-time employees and 48 part-time. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Johnson if he'd like to add anything there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, Supervisors Gillette and Cornwell have been meeting with county departments and agencies since, I guess, June, July. They met on a number of occasions to try to develop a plan for use of the Federal CARES Act money. You all may remember back in August, you approved a plan for the use of a majority of that money. The total amount of money granted by the federal government to Southampton County is a little more than $3 million. Of that $3 million, $225,500 in round numbers is appropriated to the 6 towns in Southampton County. You all appropriated $1.65 million to Southampton County Public Schools back in August, the majority of which was used by the school system to assist with virtual learning. You also set aside $600,000 for Southampton County Fire and Rescue. You've got a breakdown in your packet tonight on how much each volunteer fire department and rescue squad has received. The majority of that money is used for a replacement of self-contained breathing apparatus units. There is one ambulance that's being purchased by a volunteer rescue squad in that amount as well. You set aside $100,000 back in August for business grants. That grant program is still open. Franklin Southampton Economic Development is administering that program and accepting the applications. I think that closes out this Friday. We set aside $75,000 for purchase of PPE and building modifications of county buildings, and then you set aside a little more than $26,000 for telework, purchase of laptop computers and those kinds of things for employees that have the ability to do that. That left, in round numbers, about $400,000, and the committee indicated that they would come back to you all tonight at your October meeting with a plan for the use of that last $400,000. So you see at your places tonight, the packet, there are really 5 things on the list. The first one is purchase of security cameras for the Southampton County Office Center Community Development Building to be used to assist with contact tracing. The second is for some plumbing modifications in the Department of Social Services to allow them to install a washer and dryer to use to launder foster children's clothes when they bring foster children in through that agency. Also on the list is funding for the Sheriff's Office to purchase some thermal scanners, laptop computers, and fogging equipment for disinfection. And then there's also 2 school buses on the list at a cost of $217,000. What the sheriff was referring to is the hazard pay for the essential hazard duty employees. Dr. Edwards hit on this a minute ago. The hazard pay would be provided $1,200, one-time pre-tax payment for 108 full-time employees that qualify as essential hazard duty employees. There would be $600 one-time payments for 48 part-time employees that also qualify as essential hazard duty. $300 for 61 full-time employees that do not qualify as essential hazard duty employees, but have been working through the pandemic nonetheless. And then $150 for 3 part-time employees that do not qualify as essential hazard duty employees. It's important to recognize that hazard duty employees are defined as people who perform essential functions deemed necessary to protect health, safety, and welfare of Southampton County citizens. The functions of their duties must be provided face-to-face. The workers do not have the ability to isolate themselves or assure adequate social distance from other employees or the public due to the nature of their assigned tasks. The purpose of the hazard pay is intended to recognize the jeopardy and peril that these county employees have encountered while performing their duties during the pandemic. The total amount of funding that would come from the CARES Act, as Dr. Edwards mentioned a minute ago, is $158,400, and that covers all of the hazard, those employees defined as hazard duty employees. For the employees that are not hazard duty employees, the funding would come from your unappropriated general fund reserve. That would amount to a maximum of $18,750. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer that as the recommendation from the committee and seek your consideration and a motion to approve the recommendations that I've just outlined. And there's also at your places tonight a resolution which authorizes the hazard pay for county employees who perform work during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? We hear a motion from the board.
I so move.
Okay. There's a second. I don't think this needs any further discussion. You guys are worth a lot more than with that $158,000, and we appreciate every one of you. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is passed.
Thank you all.
Okay, I guess we're ready to get back to the regular meeting here. Next thing on the agenda is the citizens comment period. If you would like to speak on any county business, just come and give your name and address to the record.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oris Lane. I live on 26315 Shadewood Trail. You've seen me before. I'm the person who's concerned about the traffic going down 671. And I had the pleasure of going to the Citizens Transportation Board meeting, first of the month. It was a very informative meeting. I enjoyed it very much. Mr. Michael Johnson was very helpful in me understanding things about what's going on in my county. There are 3 other areas that have concerns, such as mine, and he gave us a lot of PowerPoints and prints and everything that was associated with those areas. I thank him for that, but I had to inform my residents of what I'm doing. So I sent them out a second letter, and I would like to read that second letter, if you don't mind. It said that the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee meeting that was held on October 1st. This committee recommended that the Board of Supervisors pursue a no-food truck destination on Shady Brook Trail. This recommendation will be presented to the Board of Supervisors at their next regular meeting on October 7, 2020 at 6 o'clock at Southampton High School. Before the board may consider the recommendation, state law requires them to advertise and hold a public hearing. At the October 27th meeting, Mr. Johnson, County Supervisor, will be seeking the board's approval to schedule the required public hearing on Thursday, November 24th, 2020 at 6 p.m., also at the high school. Following that public hearing, the board may adopt an official resolution making the formal request to VDOT. From that point, VDOT has 9 months to study and respond to the formal request. First, I would like to thank the members of the Board of Supervisors that night to show continued support for this campaign. I also asked them if they would like to speak. Please do so. I'm thinking that some of my residents are in the audience tonight. I would like to also thank Mr. Russell Holt and Mr. Charles Andrews of Shady Brook Trail for attending the CTAS and speaking on this matter. I would also like to thank Mr. Robert Baird for sending a letter to the committee. The presence of these residents and the continued emails and telephone calls from citizens to Mr. White, who is our supervisor, helped to move this campaign to the next level. In addition, I would like to thank the members of the CTAS board for listening to us and recommending that it be presented to the Board of Supervisors. Those members were Mr. Steve Walton, I believe he's the chairman, Randolph Cook, Ash Cutchins, Keith Davis, Matthew Gillette, and Robert White. Again, thank you for your much support coming to help decrease the number of transfer trucks traveling through the 58 and 671. And I also mentioned that Mr. White, or the White Trucking Company, informed the board that his trucks would no longer be traveling down 671. So that has decreased the volume of trucks going down our highway. And tonight I would like for you to please vote unanimously that we have the option of those trucks continuing on 58 and not going on 671. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just want, it's 650.
I'm
not
sorry,
670.
650.
Yeah.
I keep saying 650.
We gotta keep 671 open.
I'm sorry.
I'm Lynn Simmons from Southampton Parkway. I just want to add to the commendation that was received for Josh and his workers for the pandemic and what they did. In addition to that, they earned every penny that they will get from this just from what they worked, taking care of Highway 58 corridor during what was and has and still remains to be a terrible time. I know that at the onset of the tornado, we immediately went into shock, excuse me, and within 3 hours, I was aware, beyond myself, that there were deputies and rescue personnel, well, instantly 30 minutes after the tornado at our back door, but all around the corridor, the sheriff's office was working, and I don't know how many days and nights I looked at and they were never gone. So I don't know if anyone else has recognized that, but I would like to take this time to say thank you to them. I should have done it before. We've been a little busy. We will be busy for a long time. But it was just inexplicable to look out my window night after night after night, and blue lights were going all night long at every business in either direction that I could see, protecting part of Southampton County. It did something to us that we can't explain, to know, because we were the only residents out there, to see those blue lights protecting us. And I would like to say thank you to all of them at this time.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
Thank you, Board of Supervisors, for hearing me and giving me some of your time. My name is Donna DeGroat, and I own the 460 Cafe and Farmers Market, and I love what I do. Since COVID-19, businesses have been closing because government has not been our friend. Small businesses, right down to our local government. When the stimulus check came out, some small businesses thought they were going to be able to get through the COVID-19. That was until the local government decided to put our stimulus checks in their pocket without any notification and freezing accounts. I remember years ago that I heard Ronald Reagan say something like this. This is quote, "Most terrifying words in the English language are that of, I'm the government and I'm here to help," unquote. I never understood that until right now. I know big businesses are the fuel for this country. But small businesses is where it started. They are the backbone. And I just don't understand why we are going through a pandemic in our country and why our local government is not willing to work with us, instead taking from us. I just really don't understand that. Thank you all for your time. God bless.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm Warren Simmons, and I live at 27,000 Southampton Parkway. Got a couple of things I'd like to speak on tonight. First, I'm glad you approved the money for the Sheriff's Department. I wish it was more. When I look at this, the money, listen to Mr. Johnson talk about the money that was spent and how it was allocated. They got less than 200,000 to charge into COVID, and everybody else got about 3 million to stay away from it, including the teachers and school administrators who got what, $1.6 million to not teach. And I noticed today, I heard that they had a 2-hour delay at school because of fog. You know, when the sheriffs and all that, they're working in the fog with wrecks, and people can run over them really easy. They deserve more. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the $3,000 you spent a couple months ago now, I believe it was, to hold on to an option on a piece of property out near Debo. When I think about that piece of property, it's only suited really for industrial development, which is what you want. We've had some angry citizens a few months ago that were fussing because they were afraid more industry was coming into that area. And they said, nobody's going to live here. We don't want to live here. So we're not worried about people building a house there. We're not worried about a commercial business being there. So the only people that can come there really is industry. That's what we want. So why are we paying $3,000 a year to reserve it when the only people we're going to buy is an industry, and these people want to sell it? So we could spend that $3,000 a lot better if we used it to make this area a little more appealing to business. Because you see, when you think about business, you think about a light industry. When the citizens think about a business, they're thinking about another grocery store, drugstore, some business like that. And until we kind of clean up our act, nobody wants to come here. When you ride during our business areas, it's trash everywhere, the grass is not cut. Some of the businesses there, we don't make them keep their places neat. It's just nothing that appeals to anybody. And if we don't have more industry, we don't have more tax revenue, and nothing can get better without it. So we need to put our money somewhere else. We've got 5 new employees out on the Churahonka, is that how you say the road name? And I wonder when we first employed them, what they were going to be doing, because we just don't have that many building permits. But there's a lot of opportunity for them. Like I said, there's a lot of cleanup and neatness that needs to go on that they can be checking on. But I had a conversation with a roofer back a couple of years ago now, maybe when they were roofing this building and some of the other schools. This school was 25 years old, and the roof, the paint on the roof is supposed to be guaranteed for 40 years. And we replaced it. We spent over $1 million. This roof was telling me, you're going to have the same problem in a few years. He said, you know why? He said, because they're doing the same thing they did last time. He said, the county has nobody on that roof making sure that materials are like they're supposed to be, or it's being put down like it's supposed to be. So you're going to have the same problem all over again. So we need some maintenance people in this county. We seem to have a lot of teachers, we seem to have a lot of administrative people, but we need some maintenance people looking after our buildings so we can make minor repairs before they become major repairs and cost us a lot of money. I think that's a lot about what has happened at the courthouse. And it can happen, it's happening in our schools and all our buildings. So that's some things that we need to be looking into. And that's what I have to say tonight. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I'm Glenn Dyke, Nuisance. I'd just like to follow up, make a comment, follow up Warren's comments. I have witnessed it, I've been there, hearing the rain here. And I've been told by many people that the roofs are leaking in the new school. Why in the world are we sitting back and not making the roofer guarantee the work in the roof? This is going to cost county a fortune if we don't make the businesses that deal with the county live up to their obligations. The second thing is not the one thing, no end, is the people in the county don't realize that the school superintendent got a $30,000 raise. Where is the oversight? Why are they just making her payment of $175,000? This is unrealistic. And we should have some oversight, or even, I know you say you can't tell the school board how to spend their money, but what the abuse, this money could have been spent on children, other projects that needed, instead of gouging the taxpayer. This is my, going off of this concern for every citizen of this country. You better get out and vote Tuesday. You saw what happened last night. we had, as far as I was concerned, great joy when the judge was appointed to the Supreme Court. But at the same time, I looked and listened. You realize that neither one of our senators voted. They represent you and I and people in the state of Virginia, and yet they put up their hands and walked away, making no comments. I'd much rather have them stand up and say, I vote no, than to stay there to have it both ways. We talk about discrimination all these years. Who has been discriminated against more than any group? And that is the Christian. That's the only comment that the Democrats have brought up that to deny her the office of Supreme Court. No group has ever been persecuted as much as a Christian. And when you deny the highest, as far as I'm concerned, the highest office in the United States, the Supreme Court nominee, because they're Christians. That makes you really sick. And I, again, go back to say, not only did they have the guts enough to stand up and say no, they had, we do it and represent all the people in the state. That's ridiculous. Look like in this day and time, the only thing political officials, both parties, want is get elected, get the big money, and worship. Again, worship their parties instead of morals of a country. If we don't stand up now and say enough is enough, I can say all night with all the different things. But then when they stack the Supreme Court, when they pass rules and regulations that they don't like, they got to put a lot of person on it and get it overturned in the rules and the like. Our democracy is gone. You just look around. Last month, not last week really, one of the biggest internet company, Google, denied information that they knew was right, but they said, well, we're not going to allow it to be put on our media. We're going to lose every single, everything from public right to speak, to hunting, you name it, we're going to lose it. It's sickening to have this occur. And when our governor says we don't allow abortion until birth, and if they baby is born, we'll just lay it up on the table and see if he's going to live. What kind of morals are we living in? What kind of people are we becoming? Thinking that you get a dog, you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor. Or a policeman is trying to arrest somebody, they're going to be charged instead of the criminal. So what I'm saying is, we better get out and vote and protect the country. This is not election for an individual to govern our country. This is an election to save the Constitution of the United States. So if you got any influence, get people Save Constitution, because it affects every single person in this world, in the United States, and in the county. So that's all I would like to say. Y'all got a lot of influence with people. Is get them out to express their opinion by voting.
Okay, anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Charles Andrews. I reside at 26200 Shady Brook Trail. I'd like to echo what Ms. Lean had to say about the trucks, the Shady Brook Trail. There's a lot of hazmat trucks coming down that road. They shouldn't be coming down there, whether they're trucks or not. Table 1, hazmat, if you read the regulations, federal code regulations, it states populated areas, back roads, things like that are supposed to avoid. Doesn't matter if they have to go out a route or not. It is what, 5 miles around to get to Gilbert Plant. I'd like to thank Robert White for having his trucks not come down the road anymore. And I hope you guys will help push this through for no through trucks coming down Shady Brook. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay, last call, unless there's somebody else, we will close the citizens' comment period. Thank you all. All right, the next thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the September meeting. Does anybody have any changes to those minutes? If not, they'll stand approved as read. Okay. Next, number 3, highway maps. We have 2 recommendations from the Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee. First one is concerning the roundabout lighting project, and the second one is the restricting food trucks on the Shady Brook Trail. So we'll take the roundabout project first. Anybody like to comment on that?
I have a comment. I don't think we have the money to do that. I think it should be a state project, not a county project. It needs to be lit. I don't think at this point we need to finance.
All right, have any further comments? Do you want to look at this and see what the actual price is, or drop, or what you desire?
I wasn't in attendance at that meeting, but Mr. Johnson, you get a comment on the discussion concerning recommendation on this project.
I'll be glad to, Mr. Vice Chairman, and Mr. White was also in that meeting. He made some comments to add, but as you all know, we submitted the Cortland Roundabout lighting project through the VDOT Smart Scale application process this summer. And that particular project was screened out of the process very early by VDOT as not being eligible because it didn't meet what they call a V-Trans need. So at the CTAC meeting back on October 1st, we discussed that members of the CTAC were sharing their disappointment that that project had pre-screened out. And the question was asked, are there any other potential revenue streams that might fund that project and that project might be eligible for? And Mr. Catlett was at the meeting. He indicated that day that the only other VDOT funding mechanism that he was aware of that was potentially a source of funding for this project is the revenue sharing program. And the revenue sharing program is basically a dollar-for-dollar match, basically 50-50 local state. The estimated cost of the project, Dr. Edwards, the preliminary cost in round numbers is about $500,000. The construction is slightly more than 400,000, so when you figure in the cost of the design and a contingency at this point, I think a safe estimate is in that $500,000 range. So it would equate to a commitment by the county of $250,000. The CTAC discussed it briefly. I think it was Mr. Cudgett that made the motion that day. He indicated that that was the equivalent of about $0.015 on the real estate tax rate. He'd be glad to pay that to get the roundabouts lit. That's one person's opinion. But anyway, the motion was seconded, passed unanimously. So I brought it on to you all for your consideration. The revenue sharing process really doesn't start until next spring. So you don't need to make a decision tonight, it's something for you to think about. But we would need to begin work on preparing that application sometime shortly after the first of the calendar year. So certainly by no later than your January meeting, we need to know or have some direction from you all if you want us to pursue that as a source of funding.
Well, a question that I have, would that option go away? No action is taken prior to January. Does that option go away and not come up again in a future year? And my thinking is, personally, I'm concerned about the payment schedule that's going to be affected with future borrowing that this county's going to have to do with the courthouse and some other expenditures like final settlement of the payment on the roofs of the schools and some other items. And I'm a little hesitant to go along with the recommendation. I realize a unanimous vote is pretty strong support from the advisory committee, but at the same time, I think this board needs to take into consideration future debt that we're going to have to incur. We're not going to have any options out of that when the time comes. So I prefer to table it. I don't know the lighting. Have there been any at that meeting? Have there been any accidents, anything of that nature that maybe caused the lighting to be of concern to the public?
There have been some accidents that I'm aware of. I have not actually seen the accident report, but I am aware of at least one occasion I saw wheel tracks that went straight across the roundabout and into the area where the stormwater detention pond is over on the other side. That's been several months ago. It is dark at night, and if you're not familiar with it, I'm sure it can be confusing. To get back to answer your question you had, Mr. Gillette, the revenue sharing program works on a 2-year cycle that alternates with the Smart Scale program. So if we did not apply in the spring of 2021, the opportunity would present itself again in the spring of 2023. Is the cycle for that.
Well, I'm of the opinion that we maybe need to defer this. I'm not debating maybe the need, but at the same time, I think there are other priorities that are certainly going to impact the real estate taxes in this county. They're going to be coming up in the not too distant future. I think the timing of this is a little awkward for me as a supervisor. When I'm presented with the timing aspect of it, I'm in favor of waiting. I would agree with that.
I would agree with that too. This is about 100 towns that we have no control over. So we have control over this right now.
I do agree with our fellow board members, and I just for the time, I can see that they need to be led. I think that would be a benefit to the citizens of the county. I just can't make myself comfortable spending $250,000 of taxpayers' money towards that end at this point with everything we've got on our horizon. So I would be in favor of running for that date time as well.
I'm wondering if we, improve the signage there with reflecting signs, so you see that you're coming up on something.
I agree with everyone.
Okay, I guess it seems a general consensus that we'll table this for now, see what the financial situation looks like in the future. Okay, we have another matter. This is requesting VDOT to restrict through trucks on Shady Brook Trail. You have a map and everything in your packet there.
Yeah, that's something, CTAC's been working on for the last couple of meetings, and I don't see where there's any problem at all for trucks or trucking companies to go around, Shady Brook Trail. Actually, I mean, it's gonna make it safer for the trucking companies also, because you cut through there from 671 to 58, you gotta cross 4 lanes of traffic with loaded, tractor trailers with no kind of lighting or anything. Anyway, I make the motion that we move forward with the recommendation.
Second. And there's a second. Okay, the recommendation second is that we refer this for advertisement for the public hearing for the November meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those like no. Ayes have it. Okay, highway matters, areas of concern. Does any supervisor have any concern for the roads or problem roads in their district?
I'd just like to thank the highway department. I know they always growth of the grass and the median at the intersections that I brought up at the last meeting. They took care of that promptly, and I appreciate it.
I had the opportunity this past week to speak with one of our area superintendents regarding the road matters that we've discussed here previously, in addition to the work orders that have been submitted by myself and some other citizens. And he was able to provide a lot of insight to me that I was able to pass on to the citizens of my district. And some of that included was that of the 120-ish active VDOT work orders in that particular district, in the Capron district, upwards of 40 of those are in my district. He gave me a little bit of the breakdown on the roads from 460 to CDOT Chapel, Unity Road, where there were 10 work orders alone, Black Creek Road, Tucker Swamp Road, Doles Road, Iowa Road. And just today, I've received numerous emails and phone calls regarding the multiple problems that are ongoing on New Road. And there's still currently 7 work orders that they're aware of on that particular stretch of road. So they're working on it. Was the resigning message. They're aware of the problems because the work orders have been submitted. They're trying to do everything they can to, as expeditiously as possible, get to those concerns. They do prioritize their repairs based on safety. So even if your request came in first and something else, a more pressing matter came in after it, they're going to get the attention to the one that lends itself to the biggest safety risk to travelers up and down the roadway.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I talked to Ben Bryant a couple of weeks ago with my list.
Roger Jones?
No, I haven't.
Roger Basin? All right, seems like we've got everything taken care of. We'll move on to number 4, the monthly reports, and I'll just go through these and jump in if you got anything. Sheriff's Office, Animal Control, Cooperative Extension, Treasurer's Office.
Yes, I'd like to report. I'd like to give a report.
Certainly. You're welcome.
The waste collections, again, due to the fact that I turned it over to a collection agency, something that had never been done before. It is bringing in money. While I'm standing here, I would like to say, you all heard a comment, tonight on public comment period, about collections, on taxes. I don't know if you all know or not, but I will make you aware. Meals tax is considered a trust tax. A report is due the 20th of the month following the date of collections, as well as the fees that you collected for that meals tax the previous month. The pandemic was not going on in 2016. So collection of taxes is what I took an oath to do. I'm going to do that to the best of my ability with all the options I have. So I did want to bring that forward. I know people are using the pandemic as a reason for not paying. There's several taxes out there, as well as solid waste fee. A dime hadn't been collected on since 2012 when it was assessed by the board that was serving at that time. Turning it over to collections has brought in money with the courthouse updates that we have coming up and everything else that seems to be price increase coming before the board. Again, collections is what I took an oath to do. And I feel like the more that I collect, maybe that will help us having to keep increasing. Southampton County is the highest tax in the state of Virginia, the highest county tax. And I look around, and I've even been more aware and more conscious of it lately as I travel to other localities. I look around and I see what other, localities have, what's in their county. And then I see how much we're taxing our citizens. And I'm looking around in our county, and I'm not seeing that we have got anything so much better and beyond, and in some cases not as good as other localities. So I'm trying to be very conscientious on collecting, and I hope the board's going to be very conscientious on spending. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Okay, community development, solid waste quantities, personnel. Johnson?
Just a couple items, Mr. Chairman. We had 2 employees hired during the month. Carl Booman in the Sheriff's Office, effective October the 1st. Annual salary $39,598. Edgar Wright the 3rd, effective October the 5th, in the Department of Utilities, annual salary $30,418. We had 1 employee to separate during the month, Mark Howell in the Sheriff's Office, effective October the 6th.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to number 5, financial matters, the bills. Anybody have any questions about the bills?
I had 2 questions. Where did the plotters go that we bought? I think there were 2,000 apiece. And under data processing, the environmental amount was 15,000. What was that? 15,000 under data processing.
I can tell you the plotters, Ms. Updike, went to the Department of Community Development.
Both of them.
Yes, ma'am, I think so. Okay. And the other question?
Under data processing, on page, there was an environmental charge of 15,000. I just wondered what that was.
Susan, that ring a bell?
I think it's Esri.
I think it's what?
Esri, which is our GIS, 911.
Okay, everybody satisfied? Any other questions? Guess we'll do entertain a motion to pay the bills.
So moved.
Second? No further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We'll pay the bills. Okay, number 6. We have a new appointment on the planning commission in the Franklin district. I'll turn that over to Supervisor White.
Yeah, Tammy Connolly decided, well, she's having a hard time driving at night. She was the one that had taken my place when I got elected to the board. So anyway, she decided pretty much she didn't want to have to drive these meetings at night. So I talked to Brad Turner, and he's a good guy, business owner in Southampton County. Make a motion to appoint him to the planning commission for the Franklin district.
Okay, we have a second. Second. Brad Turner. Okay,
I had the occasion this week again, I've known Brad a long time, so I called him when I read our minutes, or our budget. Our agenda, excuse me, as it was proposed, and I had a chance to talk to him a little bit about the possibility of him serving us in this capacity, and he's excited about it, and I think he'll do an excellent job.
is he aware of the certification regulations to be certified within 2 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We have a new member of the planning commission. All right, number 7, remarks from Western Tidewater Free Clinic, Mr. Bob Hayes. Welcome, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Bob Hayes, and I'm a board member on the Western Tidewater Free Clinic, and I'm representing them tonight. On behalf of our patients and our clinic, I want to thank the county for their support of $20,000 for our fiscal year 2020 and 2021. This budget amount will provide comprehensive care to over 16 Southampton County patients, and they can visit our center for 210 appointments. The County of Southampton County, the County of Southampton County has supported the clinic since our inception in 2007. And during the 13 years that we've been operating, we have donated $146,250 to us. We really appreciate that. Since our opening in 2007, we've achieved the following. We provided care to over 6,100 patients. Those patients have had 175,000 appointments for medical, dental, mental health, and pharmacy services. Patients have received over 271,000 free medications or prescriptions at a retail value of $51 million. 8% of those patients have come to Southampton County. Our current cost per patient per year, we estimate at $1,200. And our cost per visit, we estimate at $95. We have a fiscal year of July to July. From January 2020 to June of 2020, 78 patients have come to us from Southampton County. They have visited us 385 times for services that we provide. Patients have received over $65,000 on that time of services. And if you put a value, $65,000 worth of medication, with a value on the services that they received, it would be $47,000. We also been affected by COVID-19, and we had closed our doors from March until the first weekend of May. Since June and July, we started seeing our patients trending up again, and we're just about back to normal service. We're very proud of our staff at the clinic. We've had very minimal absenteeism, and we have not had any cases as of today. The pandemic has caused our volunteers at the clinic to just about stop. And we saved a lot of money by the use of volunteers. However, now we're seeing some of them coming back, so we hope that continues. We have one volunteer on our board from Franklin, Southampton, and that's Dr. Sharon Shipman. We really do appreciate your investment in Western Tidewater Free Clinic. Every dollar that you invest in us, we turn it into $7. So that's a real good investment on your, for your money that you give us. I invite you to come by and take a look at the clinic in Suffolk. It's safe. Come down and please continue to support our efforts. Thank you very much for your support over the years. We're glad to answer any questions about the clinic if you have any. Thank you very much.
Any questions for the gentleman?
Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, if I might, private donation, any word you could give us regarding private donation?
Yes, you can go on our website and make private donations, but we do get donations from Southampton County. I think we've gotten somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 from Southampton County through donations, private donations.
And your website is?
WesternTidewaterFreeClinic.com. Any other questions? Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your help.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll move on to number 8. We have 2 public hearings, and we'll let Mrs. Lewis, who's the Secretary of the Planning Commission, come up and lead us through those 2 hearings.
Excuse me, I would like to say welcome back.
Thank you very much. We are very glad to be Southampton County employees. Tonight you have 2 public hearings for voluntary agriculture and forestal districts. In case some people in the audience don't know what that is, it's like a conservation easement that property owners choose to install on their property. That limits the use of their property to agriculture, forestry, and open space for the term of the district, and that is generally 10 years. And these are voluntary. We'll have to apply for them. Southampton County now has 38 voluntary agriculture districts, and about 170,000 acres of Southampton County are now in voluntary agriculture districts throughout the county. They are spread from north to south, east to west. Some are larger than others, but they all start with at least 200 acres and grow from there. This first one you have tonight is, the applicant is Joan Rice. This is in addition to the Little Texas Voluntary Agriculture District. It's located, the property is located at the southeast corner of Little Texas and Whitehead Roads. It is 282 acres. It has a zoning designation of A1 and a comprehensive plan designation of agriculture, forestry, open space, and rural residential. And the property is currently being used for commercial agriculture and forest production. The Planning Commission held the required public hearing after the Planning Commission, acting as the advisory committee, discussed this, and they made a unanimous recommendation of approval. There were no speakers at the meeting. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Lewis? Okay, then we'll open the public hearing on the addition to the Little Texas Agriculture and Forestry District, Joan G. Rice. Would you like to speak concerning that? If not, then we'll close the public hearing. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, a motion to approve that, and any further discussion? All those in favor of approval of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Unanimous. Close public hearing. The second one is to addition to 12 Oaks Agricultural Forestry District. Ms. Lewis?
This property is located at the southeast corner of Wakefield and Irwin-Dory Roads. The applicant is Betty P. Beal, and property address is 12023 Wakefield Road in Sedley. It is 175.51 acres. It is a little too small to be its own voluntary agriculture district. District, but it is a couple hundred feet too far to join the 12 Oaks District to be within the 1 mile. But the general statutes provide that if a local governing body finds in consultation with the advisory committee or planning commission that the parcel not part of the core or within 1 mile of the boundary of the core contains agriculturally and forestally significant land, it can join a nearby district. This property is a Century Farm, and it's part of the USDA CREP program. It is in the tree farm program, and it is used for agriculture, forestry, and is less, a couple hundred feet from the 12, a couple hundred feet further than the 1 mile district from the 12 Oaks district. The planning commission acting as the advisory board and the planning commission acting as the planning commission decided that this property did meet the requirements of being agriculturally and forestally significant land. The property owner says that the property's been owned by a member of the Pond family for over 100 years. There's a 2-story wood structure home built in 1908 in which the applicant resides, and a 1-story wood structure built in the 1950s. The property is 31.84 acres of cultivated land, 9.63 USDA CREP program acreage, and 134 forest acres. It significantly impacts wildlife preservation, growth of agricultural products for sale, and is a member of a tree farm program. The planning commission held the required public hearing and unanimously recommended it.
Any questions on this application? Thank you. Okay, we'll open the public hearing on the 12 Oaks Agricultural Forestry District. Any deals? Anybody like to speak for or comment on that? If not, we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve that. A second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, it's unanimous. Follow the recommendations of the planning commission on both of those tonight. Moving on to number 9, financing strategy for courthouse renovations. First thing you'll see is the Southampton County Police Project, financing series 2019A. Johnson, you have anything to add to that?
Nothing more than what's in your agenda, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rose will be talking about the permanent financing for both of those projects tonight.
All right, this is Mr. David Rose that I met earlier. If you want to give us a rundown on how we finance everything.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Members of the board. Again, David Rose. It's a pleasure to be back here. I have a hard copy of this, and I put that over there. I hand that out. I'll just wait a moment, but everything should be up on the screen as well. This is a fairly in-depth presentation, so I will move as quickly as possible. I would say that we're not here asking for you to make any actions this evening, rather to hopefully educate the board, the citizens, and whatever else you deem necessary, with the hope that something will move forward at the next one. Okay, if I could start then, Mr. Chairman, and again, I've been fortunate to work with the county now for probably about 25 years from Richmond. I managed the adaptive board company practice there, and she overhead there, so appreciate this opportunity to be back. Again, the table of contents, I won't belabor that, but again, everything I'm going to talk about is there, and anything else you need, let me know. If there's some things I can't answer, certainly I will make sure I try my best to get y'all some answers regarding Mr. Johnson. So a little bit of background, Davenport is serving as your financial advisor, and as I said, we've probably been doing that. I've had the good fortune to do that probably about 25 years, possibly longer. But again, this is something that I have been in front of you and the city of Franklin on several occasions as this has evolved. We recognize this is a joint project in many ways. We're also going to talk this evening about the school facility financing that has already had some interim funding that we did some 20 months ago. Give you some update there. Finally, we're going to talk about some next steps, as I mentioned, so there'll be a schedule in the back. A little bit more background. We began this project in terms of our work some 4 or 5 years ago, back in 2016. We looked at a series of strategies, and so we developed back in February of 2019 a two-part strategy, phase 1 and phase 2. The first phase, what we call interim financing, and I presented that, and y'all approved that, and that has worked well for us so far. We are now in the mode where some of that interim financing is coming due in December, so we need to take some actions. We're going to talk about the actions that we're going to be working on and doing with Mr. Johnson and your staff. And then secondly, phase 2, the long-term financing. We're going to talk a little bit about recommendations tonight. So with all of that said, back in May of 2019, for phase 1, for the interim financing, we did slightly under a $2.2 million bond anticipation note. What that simply means is that we're going to borrow some money, as we did. We locked in an interest rate slightly below 2.5%, which looked very positive at the time. And that has to be repaid by December 1 this year. So as I mentioned a moment ago, that's something we've been planning for. The county has the necessary resources to do that with some of the unspent proceeds and some of your available fund balances. So come December 1, that will occur. And then we are looking at phase 2, which is essentially taking care of the permanent financing for the bulk of that courthouse project. We understand that it's going to be paid for essentially almost 80% the county and a little over 20% the city. You can see those percentages right there, which were provided to us. So with all of that being said, we've tried to talk about with your staff and legal counsel, what is the most strategic way to come up with phase 2? What is the most cost-effective way? What works for the cash flows and when you want to be moving forward on this project? We'll give you a schedule there at the moment. And also, how do we make sure that you enjoy right now a very solid credit rating, that we do no harm to that credit rating? And then finally, the last bullet point, sort of where the rubber meets the road, that is, how do we do all this and make it affordable for your budget, effectively for your citizens? So what we're going to talk about a little bit later this evening is the impact, the cash flow impact on the borrowings that are going to be necessary, and we're going to tie it back to the equivalent real estate tax rates. What I mean by that is you may come up with any series of dollars, but we're going to equate it to what if you were to have a certain impact on the real estate tax rate. That's the way we're going to show it to you. I think it's going to make some sense a little bit later. That's something that I've always done with you over the years to show you what is the equivalent impact of the county going forward in subsequent budgets. So, all of that being said, we have recommended that the county and the city pursue separate financings for this project. There's a number of reasons, but they include the way in which the city can go about Borrowing this money is a little different than you. I worked with the city for a light amount of time. Actually, I started working with the city, that's not true. I worked with the city starting in 1989. So I guess, I'm not sure how many years that is. I guess that's about 31. So that's, I go back to the city. So we will recommend the city borrow separately. They have, I understand, through Amanda, that has been acceptable to them. This puts less burden on you. It also gives you more decisions as to how and when you want to do your financing and any changes you might want to make in your financing down the road. So independence works for you. What the city will simply have to do is come up with their share of the money at the time that the bids are back and they're acceptable. And we estimate that to be sometime next summer. So yeah, in that time frame, Mr. Johnson can correct me or amend that. We'll show you that schedule in a few moments. The other thing is when we started looking at this project back in 2019, we had incorporated a one-time payment, some $500,000 from Viva. We understand that dollars have been reused, or not reused, but used in some other projects, other purposes, I should say. So that has not been factored into this latest analysis. What has been factored in is the $80,000 a year estimate from a potential of a cigarette tax. That is roughly 0.5%, half cent, I should say, on your real estate tax. So again, we're saying that if the real estate tax, 1 penny, is roughly $160,000, this would be about 0.5 penny worth of support or benefit to the overall cash flows for the county. So I mentioned a moment ago that the timetable is there in the middle, but the actual amount that we're estimating the project to be is $20 million. That was provided to us. Footnote there, hopefully I'm correct in assuming that it includes design, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and the cost of some temporary facilities for the courts while they're under construction. That said, spring of 21, we expect the county to have some of the documents for construction completed. Then the thought is summer of 21, construction bids received, and hopefully they will be acceptable moving forward, and therefore late fall, early winter of 22 would be construction completion. So if I said that right, Mr. Johnson, I said that everything flows from there. So having said that, just to stop for a minute, if I could, Mr. Chairman, we could presumably wait until next summer to borrow the monies. However, in my appendix that we put together, interest rates today are at upwards of 60-year lows. So our recommendation is we know we're going to need the bulk of these monies, and why wait? We can secure highly favorable interest rates, which frankly, when I started working with you on this project back in 2016, the interest rates we were assuming back then were in the 4 to 5% to 6% range. Today, I will tell you, we are looking at potentially locking in an interest rate if things hold at under 3%, fixed rate under 3%. So literally half the interest rate levels that we were looking at back in 2016, and interest rates then were pretty favorable. So this would be something that is considerably lower than anything we ever contemplated. And you may recall I was in front of some of you last year doing some refinancings for the county solely because interest rates have come down, got a good credit rating, and we're able to lower the payments on your debt. So while things are going good, as they say, we like to jump in and take advantage of that. So all of that there, let me turn for a moment to the school roof project. It's separate and apart from the courthouse project, of course, but back in that spring of 2019, we not only borrowed some interim funding to allow you to move forward with the project, and that was again for some roofs at the school facilities, and it was for slightly under $6 million. What we then did was simultaneously apply for literary loan funds from the Department of Education. And that carries a known 2% interest rate when we get those dollars. You may remember when I said it takes several years for us to get those dollars, but we were able to, under the state program, move forward, borrow on an interim basis to get it going. And then when the state comes up with the monies, we basically pay off that interim loan, which is at roughly 2.5%, and lock in the 2%. Well, that being the case, we have, if you would, until December of 22, so another 2 years until that interim funding comes due. We purposely did that because we know it takes the literary loan fund several years to come. However, the state has told us that we're at the very top of their list, but they put the funding on hold while all of this COVID has occurred. In about 4 years, I've seen the state slow down or hold this list or freeze it, if you would, about 5 times. So it's happened before, it'll happen again. But what we are thinking is that we've got another couple of years until the interim funding. But what we also want to introduce to you is the idea that while rates are so favorable, the state does a twice-a-year program with the Virginia Public School Authority in the springtime. And it's possible, given where rates are today, that if rates basically hold where they are or close, we may recommend that we apply for the Virginia Public School Authority, pay off that literary loan anticipation note, and then just convert it to the state's Virginia Public School Authority 20-year program. Because we think we could do that around 2% as well. There's no penalty to do that. It's very flexible. And so we most likely will be talking to you come January about approving some resolutions or what have you to allow us to apply to the other state program. Both of them are tied into the Department of Education. They work collaboratively, and we represent them anyway. So this is something that we've done before, and I would like to be able to do this, frankly, because the 20-year funding of that is even more flexible in terms of repayment than the literary loan program. So to be continued. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but from our perspective, all of this is just potentially better news as opposed to problematic situation. It's just more positive while rates remain very positive. So I don't know if there's much more to be said about that, except that we have taken a very conservative approach and assume that the debt repayment for the school project permanent repayment will start in FY22. It may be FY23, but we purposely acted as if it starts in FY22 to show you what happens if there's even more pressure on the county when we combine the school repayment with the courthouse. You'll see all that in a few moments. Now, turning to the courthouse project and our plan of finance. As I mentioned, in Appendix A is some charts that show the 50-year lows in interest rates. It really is something that I am quite surprised. I'm not an economist by background, but I think even if I were, I would say I'm surprised, knowing that when I started in this business, permanent 20-year rates were upwards of 14, 15, 16%, and now permanent 20-year rates are in the 2% range. So again, better lucky than smart, I guess, and so we're going to try to take advantage of that. Hopefully it stays in that range. So as I mentioned earlier, if indeed the project estimate that was provided to us is at $20 million, what that basically means is that your percentage share is roughly $15.7 million. city share is about $4.3 million. So we took the liberties of rounding off and say your share then is roughly $16 million. On top of that, what we've done here is to look at a funding of about $17 million for you. That assumes $16 million for the courthouse project, another $500,000 to reimburse the county for the bond anticipation note monies that you've already spent, which basically tie back to certain project that I'll show you some details on, some school-related things. And then finally, an estimate of issuance cost of about $500,000. So all told, the numbers you're going to see are based upon a $17 million issue, which is very much commensurate with the way in which we borrowed from you in the past when we had some of these bigger projects. I would point out that it's through what we call a public market sale. We've done that before for the county, and we need to go through the Industrial Development Authority. That's the conduit that's required under Virginia law. It would be a lease arrangement, and if indeed the county is amenable to this approach, we would come back to you next month, subsequently, even in December, possibly, to give you the actual details of the structure of all of that. But in the meantime, I just want to give you the highlights of this. And that is that the bonds would be sold in a public market. It would be based off of the county's AA range rating by Standard & Poor's. We would also look to Moody's. Those are the two big national credit rating agencies. And your ratings there, again, are considered very solid, very strong investment grade ratings. You don't see any difference in that because, again, you are, again, very solid as a county as in terms of paying your bills and having your fund balances, all of which are very good. So this $17 million, we are showing you for the moment. The interim funding, that band that we did, the $2.1 million, there's about $1.9 million right now of unspent proceeds. It's expected another $250,000 of that will be spent. So when to, in effect, pay off this note, we think that there will be about $1.6 million still available. There will be another $500,000 if you would or so that will be needed, and that will come from the fund balance. And then some of that also will go to the Fresh Start Group project. So when all is said and done, we will need about $500,000 from the fund balance. And when we do the permanent financing, we'll reimburse ourselves. That's a lot to throw at you tonight, but suffice it to say that that $17 million borrowing will include reimbursing the county's fund balance. And that's something that we have done before as well. That's a pretty typical thing to do as you're getting ready to go into permanent funding. So if we do all of that, that's really on this page. I just jumped ahead. We're then going to show you what is the impact to your budget by all of these moving parts, all the timetables that we've shared. So here's what the structure would look like. We're thinking about borrowing $17 million. We would do interest only for 2 years, FY 22 and 23, with the theory that that's the timing at which the project is being developed, being constructed, and opening. And therefore, rather than making all the payments immediately, we allow that to be an interest-only period. And then we would repay the debt basically level, over 25 years. There'll be a little bit of structuring a couple of those years early on, but by and large, it's going to be levelized over 25 years. The structure would be, we call it lease revenue. We've done that before. And of course, what we've done here to be conservative is we've assumed an interest rate of where today, plus we've added 0.5% to that. So again, if rates were to hold, cash flows and the impact would be even less than what I'm about to show you. On the flip side, who's to say that when we go to the marketplace, it can go up more than 0.5%? That could happen as well. We just want to show you an order of magnitude. So on the right-hand side, this is what the cash flows would basically look like. We will be repaying about, it's hard for me to see, but I think it's about $25 million on a $17 million borrowing. I will tell you, when I first started the business back around 1980, when we would do, let's say, a $17 million borrowing, the interest would be basically another $17 million, if not more. Now today, we're talking about a $17 million borrowing, and the interest is about $7 million. So it's a small fraction of where it was, because again, the interest rates are so much lower. That interest rate that we are using right now is about 2.94%. So again, that is 0.5% above where the market would be today. So if you think about it, it's possible if we were able to go to the marketplace tomorrow, which we can't do for lots of reasons, got a lot of mechanics to get done, we literally would be locking in fixed rate at below 2.5%, which is, again, hard to fathom. So instead, we've added 50 basis points. It may or may not be enough, maybe more than enough, but again, that's what we've done. So what does it all boil down to if we do that? And this is the very bottom, the equivalent impact to Southampton County for the fiscal year starting in 22, we would need less than 1 penny equivalent impact to make all this work. And I want to underscore that. That is, if we have $80,000 equivalent of monies available annually from the cigarette tax, and that occurs, then we need a little less than 1 penny, which is, again, as I mentioned, about $160,000. So 9/10 of that, I'm gonna round off, take the liberties here, and say we need about 150,000 additional dollars from your overall budget on an annual basis, at least in the first several years. Don't need it for every year, but for the first several years, we're going to need that additional monies. Now, I'm happy to answer any question. I'll stop for a second. I want to add a few more things if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Okay. So there's some other positives that could possibly be there that could even work against even needing the equivalent of that 1 penny. And that is some potential debt refinancings. You may know, as I mentioned earlier, we've been in front of you, I've been in front of you to talk about refinancing the past multiple times. When I talk about refundings, I'm talking about simply taking higher interest rates and exchanging them for lower interest rates. I'm not talking about extending any debt, I'm not talking about any of that. Just simply, if you are fortunate to have a mortgage, someone says to you, you have, let's say, 20 years left on your mortgage, the mortgage rate is at 6%, and someone says to you, you can refinance it at 5% and still have 20 years to go, you go ahead and do that. That's what we're talking about here. We have looked at your debt portfolio, and there are some opportunities right now. You'll notice I've not put any numbers to any of them. Our thinking is that we would come back next month in November at your board meeting and talk a little bit closer about what those refunding opportunities might look like. They may go away. They've not been factored into any of your cash flows purposely, but there are some opportunities here. So again, that could further work against the equivalent of a penny. And again, depending upon what the ultimate borrowing rate is, could also work favorably against that 9/10 of a penny. But on the flip side, it's also possible that rates go up more than 0.5%. Let's say they go up a whole percent. That 9/10 of a penny would be a little bit higher. So again, we could give you an order of magnitude. I think the order of magnitude for citizens would be that most likely will need about the equivalent of 1 penny to make this project work based upon all the key assumptions. So last page here is just next steps. With your blessing, we would like to be back at November 24th to ask you to approve the necessary resolutions for the courthouse project. We would then meet with the IDA and have them take the necessary actions. The balance of that November, especially December, we would do a variety of things, including talking to the rating agencies. That right now is preliminarily set for the week of December 7th. We would like to get ratings back before Christmas, and then, if possible, move forward as early as middle January, which is typically a lighter calendar for borrowings. It's usually a good time. Who knows, again, what's going on in the world, it's uncertain. But the thinking would be we could lock money in that week of January 11th, think about it, roughly the 15th or thereabouts, and then could be closing on or about February 1. And then, as I mentioned, I would most likely be talking to you in the January meeting about your blessing for applying to the EPSA for literary loan monies. It's a possibility. But again, we'll be working closer with your staff over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks on that. With that, Ms. Johnson, I hope that I've said this in a way that's not too confusing for the line.
Thank you. Any questions?
What would it typically cost to facilitate the refinancing of existing debt and what we currently have to a lower interest rate? And is there a threshold? I know what it is for residential stuff, but at this scale, what is the threshold for it being worth it or not?
Yes, so typically best practices, short of some other considerations, is a net present value after the cost of issuance of 3%. That's typically what the industry has been. Having said that, it's possible, depending upon how many years are left in some of the pieces of debt, that we may suggest that if we can get any savings, those things that really have just, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6 years to go, it's worthwhile. At the same time, though, if there's some debt that's out there for probably a decade or longer, we're going to most likely suggest that we hit that 3% threshold. That's what we would recommend.
Any other questions?
Lot to digest.
Am I assuming that the layover
I don't know. I just don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anybody does. That's the question, Vice Chair. It's anybody's guess.
I understand that.
I mean, I think that from our perspective, we used to say that the closer we can get to where we are today, hopefully the less things can move. I will tell you, I remember back in April Fool's Day in 1987. It was a bad day and a good day. It was April Fool's Day. So, all right. And from April 1 to June 10th or 15th, just that roughly 10 weeks, interest rates went from, let's say here I'm talking to you about 2.5%. They went from the equivalent of 2.5%, they were at that rate, to 5%. We lost 2.5 percentage points in 10 weeks. It was incredible. And then in that October was when the stock market crashed, which really was the first big crash since 29, since 1929. That was back in 87. So again, 10 weeks, I'm talking about 10 weeks, anything can happen, especially after an election. Who knows? Now, I will say this, if it appears that the markets run up like that, or even close to that, even if you approve what you do in November, we will be talking about whether or not it makes sense to wait a few more months, because remember, as you're moving forward, you don't need those dollars basically until sometime this summer. And that's only some of the dollars you'll need, as you know. So we may have to think about some maybe other strategies, and that's where it gets a little tricky, because there's no right or wrong. But hopefully we're not in that mode. And I would say this, even if rates go up by 1% or 1.5%, which wouldn't feel good, it's still, relatively speaking, so much better than anything we had estimated going back to 2016 or before. That the other thing is, we would set up the debt, we always do anyway, that we could refinance this down the road if rates came down again. So we would not lose that opportunity. So that would be the thinking, is to try to think ahead if we get statement, if you would, a little bit. If it happens that way.
It would appear to me that things hold. You know, back to past position.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It'd be a very, very good position.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, appreciate it, and with your blessing, we'll be back in November.
It's still the time is written, right? Still the time is written.
That's right, I hope so.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you next month. All right, we're going on to first reading on an ordinance amendment. Everybody has that in their agenda. $10 to $20 for convicted defendant. And you have the ordinance in there, and the only thing we have to change is scratch out the 10 and put 20 in there. Anybody have any comments? Anything to go over with that? If not, then we entertain a motion to set that up as a public hearing.
Well, excuse me, I'm just, I'll second that.
Okay. Motion to set that up for public hearing and second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We'll go to public hearing next month on that. Okay, the capital funding request. First one's Boykins Fire Department. Rescue Squad wants $105,000. Money we already have put away. And Ms. Johnson, do you want to say anything about that?
Not much more to add, Mr. Chairman. You can see they've done an addition to their building, and they've also recently purchased a piece of apparatus that use these proceeds to assist.
Supervisor Faison, would you like to handle that, sir?
Yes, I move we approve the capital funding request from the board of officers, fire department. And the people $105,000.
Good. Second?
Second.
Second. All right. All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We have approved it. Second one is Cortland Volunteer Rescue Squad wants $14,000. That's my district, and I would be totally in favor of granting that $14,000. I'll make a motion.
Second.
You have a second? Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Give $14,000 to the Cortland people. Okay. Project updates. First one is the relocation to the Department of Community Development. Ms. Lewis, do you have anything to say about that?
They're all completely moved in with the help of Ms. Wright's department, Ms. Edwards' department, Ms. Lowe's department. All our pieces of equipment seem to work with each other on a fairly regular basis. We have citizens come in every day to get permits and request inspections and seek help for all their development concerns. The inspectors are busy. Southampton County builds about 50 to 60 brand new homes a year, each one requiring between 10 and 15 inspections. And that's just new homes. The Enviva project is going on. The Birds on Peanuts project is finishing up. And our staff is busy every day. And we keep our helpers busy too, making sure all the pieces work together. Last week it was taking apart the credit card machine and unplugging all the cords. So it's just how it is when you move into a new place. But we're very grateful to be Southampton County employees, and we're very thankful for all the help and assistance we've shown.
We're all happy that you like your new location.
Yes, and people can find us.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, courthouse renovation. Do we need anything further on that? Anybody bring up any further questions that haven't been covered tonight?
Johnson, do you have any comments on that last meeting that we had with Bob Homes? I don't know. If not, I've got one or two.
I'll just briefly comment, Vice Chairman. Overall, the project is on schedule, under budget, so far so good. We're still early, but we're working hard to try to keep it that way. The architects are looking at a couple of alternatives right now to further reduce costs based on the exterior aesthetics. I got some information late this afternoon from the architect on that, and we'll be sharing that meeting with Mr. Gillette and Mr. Cornwell in the next few days and provide the architect feedback.
Thank you.
Anything further?
I don't think so. I didn't know if it would be worth a note to let them know what we had asked for during that meeting, which was to look at an alternate covering on the back walls and be unseen. I asked Supervisor Jones some input on that, quite helpful. And Chief Judge went along with the request, so I saw that as a positive aspect in that he said it did not matter to him. And also there were some architectural changes in the back side of that building, and even on the side facing the jail, Sheriff White, and that regarded the false windows, I guess you could call them. And we didn't see a need to go into the expense of putting those in the building, since they added nothing to the use of the building. And he was in agreement to take those out. There were two things that we're looking at, or they are looking at it, recosting for us, investment. So I didn't know if the rest of the board was aware of that. That was a positive answer from the Chief Judge, I thought.
Okay.
To expand on what Mr. Gillette said regarding Chief Judge and his comment on our courthouse, he simply stated he didn't care what it looked like. As long as it's functioning to his needs in the circuit court, I think he's just as happy as he can be.
You get the Supervisor Jones way to break it down.
No. No, sir.
He can do it.
Not anymore.
Okay, anything further on that? We've already covered the CARES Act funding and the Interaction Trail project. Ms. Updike, you've been very instrumental in that. Could you?
I think I sent everybody a report, but the sidewalk and parking lot project has been awarded and will soon be underway. The smartphone app and interactive map, they've gotten a performance bond and the contract will be signed and returned this week. The trail has been laid out, the signage has been approved, the brochure is underway. We have historic lighting fixtures, ready to be ordered. And the interior, we've been working on that. So we're moving along, and it's all covered through grants.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions? We move on to 13 matters from the Commissioner of Revenue. We have 2 matters that have come up. Anybody like to speak on those requests? Well, the first request is amendment of section 1579 of Southampton County Code, which eliminate the need for annual filing of personal property tax forms by individuals. Businesses and farmers would still have to file. This change will be permanent unless the board changes its mind. Any discussion on that?
I think it would save the county a lot of money just mailing them. Save us $15,000 a year. I believe so. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, you making a motion, then we go for that?
Yes, sir. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner. Okay. Any further discussion? Then we'll vote on that. All those in favor of advertising that for public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The second request requires the amendment of section 1594 of the Southampton Code, which would extend the 3-year filing cycle for elderly and handicapped exemptions by 1 year only. The full filing requirements would resume in January 2022, every 3 years thereafter. Anybody have any comments on that one?
So it's just you're just moving it up and then back to 3 years again.
Yes, evidently it won't be permanent.
So it's going to add a year to it, then it'll go back to what's
When I read it, is that right, Mr. Johnson?
That's correct. And she's really doing this based on the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic. It's not the great time to require people to bring in a lot of extra paperwork. So she's just asking to defer that for 1 year and then get back on that 3-year cycle starting next year.
Okay, board, we need a motion to advertise that for the next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
And we have a second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We will advertise that for the next meeting. We're down to miscellaneous. The SBA disaster assistance. Anybody have any questions about that? Not, we'll move to B, the recommendation from the Planning Commission for gateway signs. I think that's a good idea.
Something that says, welcome to Southampton.
Right, spend some money here, then go home.
Yeah, that's right. I think it would be 6 was the recommendation. I would start with 2.
Where would you put it now?
Coming in, on 58 from either 35.
Let's see, Mr. Johnson, how do we set that in motion?
Well, what we would suggest is we get some cost estimates for you and we'll build that into the budget.
And then decide how many we need.
Correct.
All right, so we'll put that in motion and it's okay with everybody. I think it'd be nice.
I do too.
Um,
And while we're putting up signs, maybe we can clean the trash out of the ditches and
yeah.
litter is our biggest crop.
It is one of our big problems.
And where the tornado went through, there's so much debris that can be moved.
Well, I'll tell you, I went to Maine one time, and signs on the road said, delivering first offense $5,000.
Community service people or somebody.
What is the fine for delivering now? Do we even have one?
We do, our fine is the maximum that the state code allows.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think maybe we
This is the
can,
last time anybody in Southampton County was convicted of littering. Is that, can anybody remember that? I can't.
I know somebody threw out a lot of tires and I think he got reprimanded.
Would I ask Sheriff White a question? Have you issued summonses for littering and have it dismissed?
Yes. Sometimes it's dismissed, sometimes not. But I would say majority of the time,
It's dismissed.
but I still tell them, keep right.
okay,
Have we had many recently? Say within the last 12 months?
I know last year I probably did about 4 or 5. So,
is it difficult to prosecute somebody for that?
it's not difficult to prosecute, you know, you put it before the court and the court decides whether or not you put the evidence on, and again, it's up to the judge.
Well, thank you for your service, and I think the board would appreciate it. You guys got tough on that. You certainly have the capability to do it.
But I'd like to ask Mr. White, what brings that to your attention?
Well, what brings it to our attention is, 9 times I've seen the people throw something out in front of me. And once they throw something out, you stop them, right to something. So, and many days I go down the road and I'll see something in the road, I didn't see it happen. You know, there's nothing I can really do about that.
Over my way, it's garbage bags that people are going to the dump and blow out of the back of the pickup.
If it was garbage bags like that, I mean, if we get a call, or we do go and try to see if we can find some information in there, maybe back from the company, we do that.
All right, thank you. Late arriving matters. Are there any late arriving matters?
I've got one, Mr. Chairman. Received an email today from Ms. Jarrett requesting a joint meeting between you all and Franklin City Council. She noted that the last joint meeting was held about a year ago prior to the onset of the pandemic, prior to several of their council members taking their seats this past July. So she's asked just for me to make you all aware that they're interested in meeting. And if you all are available, I'll be glad to coordinate meeting dates and preparation of an agenda with Ms. Jarrett.
Okay. Go ahead and process that. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I have one thing real quick for everybody that's here. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention tonight, and we're hearing the same thing, that they're still leaking.
To whom are we working on to get some answers? I mean, who do we go to?
Is there a warranty on that roof?
I believe Mike has been in contact with Dr. Shannon. We started at the top where those answers to the questions such as Linda asked as far as warranty information can be obtained, because she has the keys to that information. You know, what did the contract say? What was provided, what's covered, what kind of warranty does it have? And I think she'll be able to get us that information.
Yeah, the short answer is the roofs are on warranty.
Are you satisfied with that?
That's a loaded question. For now,
I personally would like to hear something back from them about
I would
their problems and
People keep telling me the roofs are leaking, whether they are or not, I don't know.
I've gotten 2 calls from people who live in this environment here who said that the leaks are a problem. I therefore would like to hear an answer on that. We've already replaced almost $6 million with the roofs. What's going on now that we have problems?
Can we add it to the agenda for the next meeting?
Can we request a report
Yeah.
Yes,
from them?
I think that would
Provide us an update on the project and
have somebody represent that from the school, come and give a presentation to the board and answer those questions.
Well, I think that would be in order. If Mr. Johnson could coordinate that with Dr. Shannon.
I'll be glad to make the request.
And,
Is everybody okay with that? Is anybody not okay with that? Looks like we have consensus, Mr. Johnson. Okay, anything else? All right, then, motion to adjourn. Thank you.